Welcome everyone. My name is Brad Bempson. I'm the president of Torrential Data Solutions. We're the developers of the Datahaven for Dynamic Solution. Daniel Griffin, one of our project leads, will be up here in just a few minutes to give you about a 30-minute demo so you can see some of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit here at the beginning. The agenda is pretty straightforward. We'll have a couple minutes about us, then we'll move into the differentiation of our product. You may be considering other document management solutions, and we'll show you several of the things that you may want to consider that are unique to our solution that you're not going to see in some of the others. We'll have a few announcements spread throughout, a couple very exciting ones, and then we'll spend the vast majority of the time, probably a little over 30, maybe 35 minutes on a demo. Then we'll move to Q&A, and if you stick around to the end, we'll have a $250 drawing for an Amazon gift card. So this is sort of where we got our start, back in the mid-90s in the enterprise document management space. We developed a series of components that still serve as the basis of what we have today, obviously updated for modern technology. But we did a lot of work for a lot of large organizations, and we embedded our document management components into custom ERP and custom CRM solutions for some pretty large organizations. Obviously, as time passed, the custom CRM, custom ERP world kind of started to go away, so we were looking for other areas where we could leverage our skill set, our experience, and our technology. And so we landed on the Dynamics space. And so we have integrated across the Dynamics platforms, and we'll get into that here in just a minute, but have the latest technology. We'll be hosting our solution later this year, but also have a self-hosted option currently that you can take advantage of. I promise I'm not going to sit up here and talk about all the individual features and functions that Datahaven has. Suffice it to say that we have over 450 document-centric features. So if you have a document management need, chances are we can meet it with what we have, and if we don't, we're a pretty rapid development shop. We can make some very quick changes in additions to make the solution exactly what you need. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the value proposition. So when we talk about value, we got to kind of look at what time is being spent now and how much time is being wasted. According to IDC, over 26 hours a week is being wasted working with documents. And when I say documents in this context, I'm talking about emails and email attachments and other electronic files, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, and the like. So we get a lot of customers that come to us and they say, I got to have OCR. I want OCR. It's going to be the answer to all my problems. Well, it is an answer to a big problem. It just may not be as big of a problem as you think. About 15% of the wasted time, according to IDC, is dealing with data entry, and OCR is a great tool, and we have one that we think fits the bill very well. But the vast majority of the time is dealing with filing and organizing, and then later finding the documents that have been processed. So even if you come up with a fantastic workflow and you get documents in efficiently and you've done your data entry and everything is smooth and it comes all the way in, you're still going to have a lot of people getting very frustrated because they can't find the documents that they need when they need and be able to see it in the context of everything else. And that's where we have a special sauce that we're going to show you here in just a minute. The differentiation, I'm going to move through the first 5 items relatively quickly, and then I'm going to spend a little bit of time on deep data linking and virtual folders. Those are the 2 things that I want to focus on here, not because the others are less important. They're just more obvious as you see, things embedded in the interfaces that you're already familiar with, Dynamics and in Outlook, and you'll see some of the automation, including OCR. You'll say, yeah, that makes sense. That's going to really help me. Where deep data linking and virtual folders come in, it's a little bit less obvious. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. Then when Daniel is done with his demo, we're going to come back, fill in some of these blanks, and you're going to see how those differentiators really deliver value in a unique way through Datahaven. So embedded throughout the Dynamics, we mean what we say. We are embedded practically anywhere that you might need it. If you need it somewhere else, we can add it probably in a matter of a few minutes, but we have it spread throughout Dynamics by default. If you have customizations that you have done, if you have ISV solutions that you've implemented, and there is a document management component that you need integrated with that, we have integrated with scores of different ISV solutions, and as long as they have followed the development protocols that Microsoft put forth, we can do that pretty quickly. So this is what you're going to see when you see Datahaven. So on the left-hand side, you probably recognize the familiar finance and operations interface. And on the right is this virtual folder structure that I talked about. I'm going to come back to this in just a minute here and dive down into some of the details. But this is an example of a workspace that we can do. And so these are document-centric workflows. If you need to process documents quickly and get them into the system, this is the interface that you're probably going to end up using. We have the Outlook interface. So obviously Outlook there on the right, the document image right there, and on the left you see that same workflow component that was in the F&O workspace embedded directly into Outlook. So this can be used by the F&O users. It's included with the license, but you can also take a license a la carte for someone who may not be using F&O, and they can access and do things with documents from this interface in Outlook. So complete automation from beginning to end, from the time the document comes in to the time you may need to send it out, and everything in between. So you might want to opt initially for an archiving solution. So you want to automatically render the different transactions that are in F&O. You can do that with this system, and then you can start stepping things up. You can move to a workflow. You can move to optical character recognition. And the deep data linking I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail here in a minute. But we also, and you'll see when Daniel gets into the demo, that these things are automatically named and they're automatically filed basically based on one click, one piece of information that the user is going to say, this is the kind of document it is, and we're going to know instantly where it belongs, how it should be named, and how it will be found later. We can push it through an automated workflow. The easy approval, Daniel's going to show you an example of that from any email interface. It doesn't have to be Outlook, but any email interface, you can quickly say approve, reject, delegate, a few notes, and it'll go right through the system automatically. So we all know Dynamics can be a complex system, just like any ERP. Things can get pretty complex with all those different relationships, and you start throwing paper and emails and email attachments, you start to get really frustrated. So you might say, oh my gosh, where's that file? And has anybody said that in their office? Maybe once or twice? We're going to ban that phrase. You're no longer going to have to say that because the magic virtual folders. And so this will show you, and Dana will show you how it gets built out, and you'll see it live here in just a minute. Things we don't do. We don't do file attachments. These are not attaching to a transaction, then you got to go find find that transaction, 4 months later in order to find that document that you put in there. And Sally over here, she did it a different way. She attached it to the order, not to the quote, so you're never going to find it. We don't do that. And it's one copy, so we can present and display that anywhere in the system based on one copy of the document. And these virtual folders, I emphasize, are not Windows folder structures. They are far more powerful. Deep data linking. So like we said, it's a complex world with finance and operations. But what we do is take care of all those relationships, and we establish them and we maintain them programmatically, so you don't have to be thinking about this stuff. We create these virtual folders on the fly, again, using code that we've developed. You can display any relationship in that folder structure at any level of granularity. Now, maybe you want granularity, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to have most of your documents displayed and 1, 2, 3 levels deep, but others you might need to have 6, 7, or 8 levels deep for whatever reason. We can do that, do it automatically. Nobody's sitting here right-clicking, add new folder in the Windows file system. This is going to give you enhanced visibility across the organization. It's going to enhance security, so even though you may have somebody who can get to an F&O record, they may or may not be able to see certain documents. They may or may not be able to see certain folders in Datahaven. And even if they can see documents, we can lock those down so they can only read them. It's a read-only setting. but others, they may be able to make annotations and do other changes to them. And enhanced navigation from any one of these folders, any one of these documents, you can right-click, and Daniel's going to show you this, launch the related record, automatically shows up. You don't have to jump around in 15 different areas of F&O in order to see it. So circling back to the screenshot, you see on the customer record the ability to see ERP-related documents at the transaction level. And this can go all the way down to lot. We can do lot tracking, any level of detail that you need to roll documents up and be able to see them, we can handle that. All of these folders and all of these documents I've said before are automatically named. So you don't have to go in and say, well, did she name it with the date first, or did she name it with the vendor second? I don't know how she did it, and Sam, he did it some other way. We, behind the scenes, pretty subtly enforce all of that. From the screen, you can even see exactly where a document is in workflow, if it's in workflow. Customer service reps, they may be able to say, well, we received it and it's pending, review. It's a quick run through and be able to see that. Our first integration, I promise, is not with the artist, formerly known as Prince. It is with the business application, formerly known as CRM, customer engagement, whatever we're calling it now. So now you have the same kind of interface, and you can move this folder structure wherever you want to see it. So now from CRM, you can see the ERP-related transaction documents at any level of detail. You can also see the CRM-related documents. So you may have saved a document associated with the account record in CRM that you need to be able to see in the ERP. You can do that right here. So you have full visibility from F&O into CRM, and vice versa, from CRM into finance and operations. Second announcement, the integration with Flow, and it's actually Microsoft Flow, not Flow from Progressive. So you'll be able to see an example of that, and this is just the screenshots. Daniel's gonna kick off a Flow, and you'll be able to see, so you would have entire access to our API to do anything that we can do from within a Flow. You can trigger a document to move in our workflow, and vice versa. If something moves in our workflow, it can change the status in Dynamics. So now we'll start moving into the demo, and I will stop talking. But first, just a little bit of a opening here so you can see sort of what's coming, because Daniel has a fire hose of things that he's going to show you. So we're going to move across. We're going to start in CRM. We're going to move over to ERP, and we're going to go through the sales, purchasing, payables process. But we're going to connect everything across the board with Datahaven. You'll see that folder structure throughout. So he's going to move through the sales quote. He's going to receive the customer PO. Then he's going to create the sales order, route the customer PO using Flow. The PO is going to be created on our side to go out to our vendor. We're going to send it out to them. We're going to receive the goods from the vendor in F&O. And then we're going to receive the invoices, do a three-way match, and even do some non-PO invoices. And he'll show you some of the Outlook integration as well. So with that, I'll turn things over to Daniel, and then we'll come back and do a little wrap-up.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? All right, great. I tend to talk a little bit loud and fast, so hopefully we'll be okay. So we're taking a big risk because we are doing all of our demos. Cloud-based software has to have an internet connection, right? So just bear with me a second and let me make sure that we're all logged in and everything. Oh, we're not on, we haven't closed out the PowerPoint, have we? What do I do to get that off the screen? Oh. There, are we looking at the right thing? Okay. All right, so we're going to start out in CRM. Just take a quick poll from the crowd. This is a finance and operations session, but are some of you leveraging CRM in addition to finance and operations? Okay, then this part of the demo is definitely for you. So Brad made the announcement that we have integration with CRM now. So we've had integration for finance and operations for about a year now. NAV and BC for much longer. CRM is new, and So just kind of taking the same concepts that we've always used in our solution. At the highest level, I'm on an account here, and you can attach documents and see documents that are tied directly to the account in these folders here. Talk about what these folders represent, subtype folders, here in a minute. But the way that we take our solution to the next level is we show related transactions underneath of the main transaction that you're on. So in this case, I'm showing all the quotes for this particular account. So once this loads, then I'll show it to you. So we'll just give that a chance to load. There we go. Okay, so these are all the quotes that are here for this particular account. So these quotes are there because we're basically doing a data lookup in Dynamics to display these using OData. So if we add a new quote, then the folder immediately gets put there. So Brad mentioned earlier that we're not having to create folders. The folders get created dynamically. So whenever we add a new quote transaction for this particular customer, then it's going to add another folder and give us a place to put documents. Pointing out also below, we have, these are invoices. So this is showing content from inside of the ERP system, even though we're in the CRM system. Okay, so we're looking at the invoices and any associated documents, which I'm not sure if any, yeah, these do have some associated documents. So the idea there is we have one repository, one copy of the document, even though we're working with two systems. Okay, so it's important to note. Okay, so kind of moving into our use case, I'm going to go ahead and move into our quote that I've created for this session. So I'm going to choose from the right-click menu, I'm going to choose Launch Link Record. So that's we kind of have the data visualization piece that shows you all of this data, and then you can use that data to navigate around inside of Dynamics. So when I right-clicked on that, then in the fullness of time, it's going to take us over to the quote, and it's going to show us the quote document that that I just right-clicked on. So we'll give that just a second to load. Hopefully it will, and when it comes up, then we'll move forward. All right, so it's also, what that did right there is it authenticated me. So it actually used my Microsoft account to authenticate me to Datahaven there. So while this is loading, it's probably a good time to talk about security. So every feature, function, even down to the subtypes in our system is controlled by security. So any right-click menu option or toolbar option that's up there, whenever you click on it, or when the availability of it is controlled by security. And then when you get down into the document level, say that you're storing, in this case, now I'm on the quote, which has finally loaded. We have all these different kind of document types that we can attach to a quote down here. We can make it so that certain document types are not even visible to certain types of users. So if you have sensitive documents like credit applications for an account or something like that, that you don't want everybody in the organization to see, then you can lock that down so that only certain groups can look at those.
Does Datahaven have their own set of security outside of what's set up in finance and operations?
Yeah, so just to repeat your question, we need to repeat it because it's being recorded. She asked if Datahaven has its own security model outside of what's in finance and operations. The answer to that is that we integrate with finance and operations groups. So when you add a user to a finance and operations group, that's tied to a security role inside of our system. So that basically you can enforce all the security by moving users around inside of Dynamics instead of having to move them around inside of our system. Okay? So that's a good question. Okay, so I'm going to attach a document to this record just to show you how that works. So we do that by using the three controls that are down here at the bottom of the screen. So if I had a scanner attached, I could scan paper documents directly into this record. If I want to get it off the file system, then I can click this button and it goes and gets it from the file system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop it from an email. So I'm going to go over to my email and we're going to find my demo documents here. So let's see, where did this go? Did I miss it? Oh, yeah, I did. Hold on. Too many folders. All right. And this is why you can't use Outlook as your document management system. All right, so I'm going to grab this email right here, which represents the customer PO, and I'm going to drag that down, and I'm going to drop it into the Dynamics system. So I'm going to go here and drop it. Now what you noticed is I dragged it in, and now it's prompted me, and it automatically selected customer PO because that's the folder that I was on. So I double-click that, and it's going to import the document and put it in here. So, you know, one thing that we're trying to do throughout our interface is to reduce the number of clicks that you have to do at any point in the system. So, you know, with just a few clicks there, basically just drag and drop, and then you choose the subtype, you've put a document in there. When you're using the stock Dynamics functionality, it's, you know, it's not that easy. It's many, many clicks to get a document in. And then also another thing that happened is the document got automatically named. So we consider that a real value driver because we're naming it using information. So we use the subtype, we use some information from the quote, and then the document date to automatically name the document. So that way you're not having to type in a name, and there's some inconsistencies in how people do that. And also it saves time, so you're not having to spend the time to change the document name. So now that I've attached that customer PO, the next thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to activate the quote and create a sales order, which I've actually already created a sales order. So I've simulated that, and the sales order has already been created for this. But I'm going to go ahead and activate the quote. So what this is going to do, we have a flow tied in with this process. So whenever a quote status changes to activated, then we trigger a flow that automatically routes the customer PO to a queue. So if I refresh this and we go back and look, then we're going to see that our customer PO should be routed to a workflow. So when I click on it there, whereas before it wasn't in a workflow, now it's in the approved quotes ready for sales order processing. So that was executed through a flow, and if we go over and look at our flow over here, what we should see is that, there we go, 3 seconds ago our flow was executed and the document was routed. So that shows, actually that's not the right one, we need to refresh. And of course, there's not much value in looking at this, but basically it ran through a flow. So whereas in the past, in order to do things like this, it involved custom programming. Probably in the CRM system, we would have to write custom code that would call our API to do something like that. Now our entire API, whether it's routing documents, renaming documents, moving documents around, basically anything you can do in our system, we can make available to Flow so that you can initiate transactions in our system using Flow. All right, so now we've wrapped up our quote here. So now what I'm going to do is, so again, I expanded this sales order folder, and I can see here that there is a sales order in the ERP that's associated with this quote. So now I'm going to move the transaction, and the rest of the demo is going to be over in finance and operations. So I'm going to click Launch Link Record, and what that's going to do is it's actually going to take me over to the ERP system. So we can even launch records between systems as well. So if you're a user in both systems, then you're able to navigate around. So now I've gone right into that sales order, but you see that we also have a folder for the related quotes. And when I expand that, we're going to see all the documents that were attached to that quote that we were just working with. So here's our customer PO that we were working with, along with any other attachments. So again, 2 systems, 1 repository, 1 copy of the document shared between the 2 systems. All right, so kind of moving forward with this use case, so I have a sales order here, and now in order to make this purchase, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to convert this over into a purchase order. So I am going to go here, and I'm going to generate a new purchase order from this sales order. So we are going to buy from Acme Office Supplies, and we're going to buy 10 of these to match what we're quoting at $8.99 a piece. Okay, good. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to generate my PO. Oh, I forgot to select lines. Let's do that again. Check that box this time. Thank you. Now I'll go ahead and do that. So now it's going to generate our purchase order correctly this time. And what we're going to see is, we're going to see this in the folder structure when this process is done running. We're going to see that it creates a folder for the purchase order. So again, all I'm trying to show here is that as the transaction builds and grows, there's folders that are getting added and more places where you can put documents. And again, we're putting the documents and we're making them visible from all these different transactions. So you're not having to actually, like if you ever want to see, you know, a document that's associated with this sales order, you don't necessarily have to go to the sales order. You can get to it from the customer card. You can get to it from, you know, all kinds of different places. So if I go to related purchase orders, I should see one under here now, and I do. So now I'm going to go ahead and launch to that, and it's going to take me over to the purchase order. So now I'm going to continue on with this, and now we're going to kind of flip this over into an AP use case going forward. So the purchase order has a little bit different view. So here, this purchase order is brand new. So we don't have any invoices or receipts on it yet, and that's getting ready to change. We do have line documentation. So one thing we can do is we can attach documents at the line level. That includes rolling up items as well. So I should have shown this on the sales order side because we're doing the same thing over there, but any documents that are associated with this, so I have item docs here. So this is spec sheets and other miscellaneous attachments that relate to the item. So the use case for this is if you need to create a package and send it out to a customer or a vendor of spec sheets or, you know, any other kind of documentation. We're trying to make all that documentation available to you on the transaction so that you're able to pass that on. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this purchase order. So that'll take just a second for that to complete. Then once it's confirmed, I'm going to show you our outbound capture capability. So we also have the capability to capture a transaction. You can either capture a document from a transaction. So in this case, I'm going to click this button and capture to Datahaven. So what this is going to do is it's going to run the purchase order report, and it's going to capture it to the record. So when I go over here, we can see now that there's a purchase order attached here. And when I open it up, you see that it just ran the Dynamics report that was associated with a purchase order, and it captured it. So this allows you to capture it. Maybe now we need to send this out to the vendor. We can also make this part of an automated process. So I initiated it manually. We can also tie that in with confirmation so that when you confirm the PO, it can automate the capture and even automate the sending of that captured document. And we can include other documentation as a package when it goes out as well. Okay, so now that we've confirmed this, now the next step is to receive. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and do a receipt for this entire purchase order. So I'm going to go ahead and change the receive now quantity to 10, and I'm going to receive it. And once I do the receipt, you're going to see that the receipt folder will now show up under here. So we'll put in 16, got to make it unique, 10, 16, 19, we'll do -5. How about that? All right, so now we're going to go ahead and generate that receipt. And as soon as this is done posting, which again should just take a second, then we're going to see now there's a place that you can put receipts. So now if I wanted to attach the packing slip, I have a place to put that. So if I'm in the warehouse and I have a packing slip, I could just click this button right here. I could scan it in right into the transaction. Or, you know, I can do it from right here on the PO without having to even go to that transaction. So I'll just go ahead and attach. So I click that button, and I'm just going to pick a document off the file system in this case, so show you how that works. Click that button, packing slip, now we're attached. So again, just trying to show you how as the transaction builds, there's more folders, more places to put documents, because as the transaction grows larger, then there's more content, and we're making all that content available to you. So now that we've gone through kind of the drag and drop and attachment and seeing the folder structure, I think you guys probably get that at this point. We're going to transition over to the workflow side of things. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to switch to the Datahaven workspace. So this is our workflow, and our workflow really has two primary purposes. One is to do approvals of transactions. So I'm going to show you that towards the back half of this demo as we get through it. But the other purpose behind the workflow is to give you a place to put documents before the transactions exist. So in the use cases that I've shown you so far, we already had a transaction. We had a purchase order, we had a sales order, we had a quote, and we just attached documents to those already existing records. In this case, the document's going to come in. We don't really know what it is and what we're going to do with it yet, but we want to get it into the system so that we can process it. And you can't write a report against a stack of paper on your desk, and you can't write a report against an email inbox. You can write a report. You can see the status of documents in here. You can see that there's a little number, and it's kind of small, so it's probably hard to see in the back there. But there's numbers that show you how many documents are in each one of these. So the workflow kind of gives you a dashboard view of where all your documents are in the process. So these documents are in a queue, and there's 3 of them here. And I could manually attach these to records and process them by using these buttons. So if I click this button, it would generate a new record from that document. So if I click this button, it's basically, I could make a new purchase invoice, for example. The document would be attached, and then I could associate it with a PO, or I could route it through a workflow. So it could be, I could create a non-PO or PO invoice by clicking this button here. This button would allow me to link to another existing record. So say that this was a packing slip and I wanted to get it attached to a receipt. I could click this. It would bring up a search screen, and I would be able to get that document attached to the record that it goes with from right here in the workflow. In this use case, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push these through the OCR process. So I'm going to bring in one more invoice, and I'm going to do that through email. So we'll pretend that this is our accounts payable inbox. So how we usually do this is, most companies now have an accounts payable inbox, and we integrate with that. We basically monitor that accounts payable inbox, and we automatically pull documents into the workflow. So documents can come in via paper. We can scan them. If they come in via email, though, we can pull them directly out of the email. They never have to become paper, and they'll get processed. So in this case, I'm actually going to drag one into an Outlook folder because that's what I have our system monitoring right now rather than the inbox. So I drag that in there. And what we're going to see is after a few seconds, it's going to, actually, I picked the wrong one. Shoot, let me pick the other one.
Does it interface with all email?
Yeah, it does, yes. So it's not, it also has SMTP and a couple other ways to be able to do email. So it's not just Office 365. And it works with Office 365 as well as on-prem Exchange as well, and Gmail or any other email system. All right. So it already picked up my first one, but this is my AP invoice, so it's going to pick that one up in a second. So we saw it disappear. So I've actually dragged 2 emails in, and I'm going to delete one of them because that's not the one we want to process. But we could see that it sucked the documents in. So now I have 5 documents in my workflow, and I actually want to get rid of this one. Yep, we want to get rid of that one. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off the OCR process, and I'm going to capture these documents automatically. So, one of our, for high volume customers, we have OCR, automated processing for accounts payable invoices. And as you watch this demo, just keep in mind that this isn't necessarily limited just to AP. That's the most common use case for it because that's a pretty high pain point for most organizations is data entry for invoices. But we can extend this to other areas of the business, whether it be flipping PO or flipping customer POs into sales orders or any other implementation where you have high data entry needs. So I'm going to go ahead and cause OCR to batch up these invoices and start processing them. So that happened pretty quickly. So now the background processes are running on these invoices. So normally all of this would happen automatically, and in fact the background processes are running automatically. Normally even the batch creation process would happen automatically. So as soon as we get enough invoices in there to make a batch, it sucks them all in and it starts reading all the data off them automatically. So what you're going to see when these invoices are done processing in the background is that our system basically looks at every invoice template and figures out what vendor it goes with. If it hasn't seen a vendor template before, then it's going to prompt the data entry user to enter that information and basically set up that template. So it's not going to be something that the IT staff or the high-level accounting people have to set up all these templates. It's going to be something that the data entry operators can do while they're doing their regular verification process. We're going to see an example of that here in a second, okay? So the background processes are done for those 4 invoices. So that ran pretty quickly for 4 invoices. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up the verification window. Correct, yeah. So I've done a lot of clicking around and moving around. In reality, this is normally the first place that a user would see an invoice, because in our regular process, we've pulled the document in from our workflow or from email. It went into our workflow, OCR picked it up, and then now we're presenting it to the operator so that they can and basically verify what OCR is recognized. So the verification step is where we basically show any errors or anything that the OCR engine is unsure of. Like this field, for example, is listed here in yellow. So that means that it failed a special OCR specific business rule called a low confidence character rule. So it looked at those zeros and it said, I'm not quite sure that those are zeros, so I'm going to put it in front of the operator and they can make sure. So we can tweak all the settings on this and basically make it, we have some customers that just send their invoices right through. They don't even stop at this verification process if there's no problems with it and it matches the PO and all that kind of stuff. So, in this case, though, I have it stopping, it's 100% verification. So just to point out, we're kind of running short on time a little bit, so I'm going to move a little bit quickly here. We recognized the PO, and we picked up the total off the invoice, and then we matched that up with the amount that we've received. So this is the PO that we've been working with all along. We received $8,990 worth of stuff, and the invoices for that amount. So we're going to do a total match here. We can also do a line level match, but in this case, we're doing total matching because that works, 90–95% of the time, and it's more accurate because you're doing less recognition. When you're recognizing each line, which we can do, obviously, then there's just more chances for it to miss a character or something like that. So in this case, the total match usually is sufficient to handle most invoices. So I'm going to check this box. So one important thing to note that's kind of a differentiator for our OCR solution, we want this to be a one-stop shop. We don't want the invoice to go to OCR and then we throw it back over to Dynamics and somebody's got to deal with it now, even though it was a perfect match. That doesn't make sense, right? We want to go ahead and post this invoice because somebody's looked at it, they've verified the information, we think it's good. So we want to go ahead and have this invoice post. So what I'm going to show you when this part of the demo is over is that this invoice will get posted automatically. So I'm going to go ahead and submit it. Now it moves me on to the next invoice. All right, this one failed. It has a different icon down here, which again in the back is going to be hard to see. This has a different icon. It basically, this invoice is awaiting receiving. So that's a pretty common scenario where you get the invoice ahead of when you actually get the goods that you've ordered or a service that you've ordered. A lot of times you'll get the invoice first, and there's no receiving on the PO before that happens. So in that case, what we do is we detect that special case and we route our invoice over to a special holding area. Then when the receiving actually happens, we go ahead and redo the match, and we go ahead and post that invoice automatically without having to put it back in front of an operator. So again, just the whole theme, trying to reduce touch points, that's another way that we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and submit it, move on to the next one. All right, so this invoice is, it just has an X down here, and that's because it's a price match. It's a price mismatch. So here we can see this invoice is for $499.50, and what you may or may not be able to see is that this is the amount that's received, $399.50. So that's a mismatch. So it just shows up as a mismatch, and then this is going to get routed to an exceptions queue. All right, so this next invoice is, an example of a format that the system hasn't seen before. So the first three invoices, you notice that all the data was already filled in. That's because we've already processed that invoice, and the system basically knew where all the data was, and it picked it up automatically. In this invoice, in this example, the system hasn't seen it before. So we're going to train it to recognize this vendor's invoice right now. And again, I'm playing the role of the data entry operator right now. So, again, it's not something that your IT staff is going to have to do. Your data entry operator is going to do this during their normal course of data entry. So I'm also going to process this invoice as non-PO because in the next segment of the demo, I'm going to route this through an approval workflow to show you how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the type to non-PO, and then I'm going to go ahead and associate this with a vendor. So I'm going to click Look Up Vendor here. And what this is going to do is it actually goes and looks at the live Dynamics data. So we're doing a web services call here to actually go get the vendor record from Dynamics. So if you have a scenario where you have an invoice that comes into the OCR engine and the vendor doesn't exist, you can get somebody to create the vendor in Dynamics, and then it's there immediately. You don't have to wait till the next day until the data set until some offline data set refreshes. We're looking at the live Dynamics data to do all this verification. So I go ahead and I capture that. For the invoice number, I'm going to click on the invoice. So I click on that, and it automatically captures the data and enters it here in our invoice number field. So not only is that a fast way to do data entry, it's also remembering where I click. So I'm building this fingerprint out, so the next time that you get an invoice from this particular vendor, then it's going to know where to find that information. So I'm going to do the same thing for the due date. You'll notice that the invoice total is already filled in, and the tax total is also already filled in. So that's because we did keyword lookup. So it looks for keywords on the invoice, such as down here the word total, and it looks to the right and it found the total. So that's kind of a helper so that you don't have to go and click on every single field. And then finally, we can also capture the line items on this. So I'm going to set that up real quick. And to do that, all you have to do is you tell it what the first line looks like. So I'm going to go through and just draw little boxes around all of this real quick. And it's very fast. It doesn't take any time. Even though I'm talking through all of these invoices, I've still processed them pretty quickly. So now I go up and I click Find Details. So based on me telling the system what the first line looked like, it pulled in all 3 lines automatically. So looking at this invoice, you know that real invoices don't look like this. Real invoices are, they're not necessarily pretty and well lined up and all that kind of stuff. So our system is not column-based, so I didn't go through and click on columns to identify where the item number is, where the item description is. I basically drew boxes, and I taught the system what a line structure looks like. So that helps it do a really good job, even on the complex invoices that you normally get, the ones that aren't like perfect OCR demo invoices. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up now. So I've selected the header only option. So in this particular use case, what this is going to do is it's going to register the invoice, and it's going to create an invoice approval journal entry for this particular invoice, and it's going to attach the invoice to it. And we're going to route that through a workflow when we get into the next segment. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And of course, it failed a special OCR business rule. So what we're seeing here is that this invoice number is a duplicate for the vendor. This is a demo invoice. I've processed it many times before. So the system's able to detect that this is a duplicate. And that's important because we're still early in the process. Remember, this is the first time an operator's seen this. We're able to figure out that it's a duplicate before any other further work is done on this invoice. So we haven't routed this for approval or anything yet. We're able to figure out that it's a duplicate right from here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back out of this, and I'm actually just going to change my invoice number to a different number so that this will get entered. So now this is done. So now we'll move on to the next segment. So what's going to happen now is that all the data that I've recognized is going to get exported, and it's going to put all this information over into Dynamics. So for the invoice that was posted, or the invoice that we chose to post, that's going to post a new purchase invoice. For the 2 that are exceptions, it's going to route those to exception buckets. And then for the non-PO invoice, it's going to route that to a non-PO area so that it can be routed through an approval workflow. And hopefully this will finish running pretty quickly, and I'll be able to show you all of that. So we'll take a look real quick and see what status that we're in. And it's still running, so we'll just give that a few seconds. And it is going to run for just a second because it is actually going to post the invoice. And I don't think I've done one today, so it's going to take it just a second to do that. Okay, so it's actually done. Okay, so that's good. So now if we go back over here and I refresh our workflow view, we can see now that our OCR queues are empty, and now we've moved. So here's the one with the PO mismatch. So when I click on this invoice, this is the one that was missing this is the one that had the price mismatch. It got routed there. Awaiting receiving, this is the one that was awaiting receiving. It got routed there. So again, we can have people work through these queues and follow up with the vendor and do whatever they need to do. For the one that posted, that one's right here. If I launch the linked record from this document, then it's going to take me over to the posted invoice journal record that got created. So here we can see this is our invoice that's posted against this purchase order. So we can see we've posted an invoice, $8,990. So that's automatically posted. We're done with this invoice, and now the invoice is attached right here, so we can see the invoice that went through the process. So now, just to wrap things up, I'm going to route that other invoice that we were processing, and I think I'm running out of time here. Got a few more minutes, about 5 minutes. Okay, good. That's plenty of time. Okay, so for the one that was captured as non-PO, so I'll highlight that so you'll recognize which one it is. So for this one, we're going to route it through a workflow queue or work through a workflow approval process. So normally, most organizations will set up an automated process that do the things that I'm getting ready to do automatically. So the most common scenario is to set up an approval matrix where you have you basically route based on department code or based on the invoice amount. So certain people can approve invoices of certain amounts. In this case, I'm going to do it manually just to show you how that works. So I'm going to choose approval routes. And this is going to give me the opportunity to pick the people that I'm going to route it to. So this is more of an ad hoc workflow. I can build a path that an invoice is going to go through. So this is not a predefined path. This is one that I can basically augment and put in here so that basically it can get routed through. So I'm going to choose 2 approvers. So I'm going to choose me, and I'm going to choose Brad from the recent list. So now I've basically built this path here, and I'm going to route it for approval. So now when we go back to our workflow and I refresh, we're going to see that that document has now been routed out for approval, and it's been sent to, I think I picked myself first as the approver. So I'm going to go through here, and so now there's a number of different ways to approve the invoice now that it's been routed for approval. So if I'm a workflow user and I have Dynamics, then I can go into the Datahaven workspace and I can approve it from there. So I would go into my queue, which if I'm really an approver, I'm not going to see the 5,000 queues that I'm showing you right now. I would typically only see a handful of queues because queues are also security controlled. So I'm going to go into my queue. I'm going to find my invoice. That's this one right here. I can right-click on it, and I can approve it from right here. So I see the invoice here. I choose approve, or I can launch the record that it's attached to, and I can see the invoice inside of Dynamics if I need to. But a lot of times your users may not be Dynamics users, or they may be out of the office or whatever, not have access to Dynamics, and they need to participate in the approval process. So for that, we have email easy approval. So I'm going to show you that. So if I go into my inbox, I can see here that I've gotten an email. I'll see if I can make this a little bigger so that we can see it. So this email was sent to me from the system when this invoice got routed to me. So I can approve this invoice by simply replying to this email. So that way, all I have to do is click reply. You'll notice that the attachment was there. So if I want to view the invoice, then I can do that. So I can type in approve. I'll hit send. And when that goes through, what we're going to see is I'll get back a confirmation from the system to say that we'll get a confirmation back that says that it's been processed successfully, which we'll wait just a second for that. And at the same time, it's going to move the document over to the next step in the approval process. So we'll give that just a second to finish. There it is. So now it's been successfully processed. When we go back over here, when I refresh, we're going to see that that document got moved out of my queue. Then I think the next step in the process was Brad's queue. So now we can find it here. If I go back to the approval routes, I can look at this and I can see that there's a check mark now next to my name that shows that I approved this invoice. And the next person in line for approval is Brad. So now he would approve this invoice and it would go through, and now we could go ahead and post our invoice because it's been fully approved. So after he approves it, then it would go to the completed processing queue, and then from there you could pull up the invoice and post it. So that's about all I have. So thanks for question.
Sure. At what stage would you do the coding of the non-PO invoice?
So that's a good question, and that maybe could be one of the workflow steps that it goes through is a needs coding step. And from there, what you can do is, just to show you real quick, I can show you rather than tell you, I can go to launch link record. And of course, this is going to take me to the journal entry because that's what this is attached to, but we built a little button here that'll take you into the approval journal for this. And then from the approval journal, you can go ahead and code the invoice. Another way we can do that is we can actually do that coding from inside of OCR. So probably the more likely scenario is that we would create a pending vendor invoice rather than an approval journal entry like I did here, and then we would code it to maybe a procurement category along with any other dimensions that we enter. So we can actually customize that OCR screen to provide those dimensions and procurement categories there so that you could do it there, or we could do it automatically based on keywords on the invoice. So if you wanted to code certain lines on the invoice to certain procurement categories, then we could do that just based on the words that are in there. You know, there's a lot of options for automation there, and it really just depends on, you know, how you want to do it and what level of automation you want. Did that answer your question?
Well, while we're taking questions, we're going to pass around a bag here for you to put a business card in if you have it. If you don't, maybe just write some information on a piece of paper so we can have the drawing for the Amazon gift card, $250 here. And we'll do that right as we wrap up.
Okay. Do you have another question? I thought I saw another hand.
Just a quick question. What is your DPI on your standard DPI?
Okay, so the question is, what is the standard DPI on OCR? We usually recommend 300 DPI. Right. It will work adequately at 200 DPI. One thing that has advanced OCR is that most companies generate their invoices through their ERP system. Right. So now you get really clean, good-looking invoices that are PDFs. So it's almost like poor man's EDI to a certain extent because, you know, the invoice is so perfect that we get nearly 100% recognition every time on it because it's a really clean PDF, you know. So that sort of advancement has actually helped OCR work even better for customers compared with scanning invoices. And, you know, you get some degradation whenever you scan an invoice. The number of times you go through printing, scanning, each time that it gets touched, you know, then there's more degradation on the format. So
twofold question. So what is your storage capacity you recommend for a middle-sized company based on that 300 DPI?
Normally a 300 DPI PDF, I think, is about, it's between 100 and 150K. So you would multiply that times the number of documents you would get per day, week, month, year. And we usually size for 3 years of growth, I would say.
Right.
So, and just as a note, all the documents are stored inside of a SQL Server database. So they're not stored on a file system or in SharePoint or anything like that. So, you know, just to repeat his question, how the documents are stored and what storage capacity we need. So that's usually what we calculate. At 200 DPI, which is probably a more industry standard if you're not doing OCR, 200 DPI is between 50 and 70K per image for black and white images.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Maybe I missed it. Did you talk about three-way matching at all?
I did, yes. So during the OCR process, so the question was, did I talk about three-way matching at any point? Yes, during the OCR process, what it did there was it pulled up the PO information, including the exact receiving, or what had been received, and then we also have, so we have the invoice total, we have the PO total, and we have the receive total. So it did all three, and it did. So that's basically how it accomplished it. Now it did it on the total, which in Dynamics that's an option as well to do like a total match versus a line level match. So that's how we did it there, is we did it on a total match. And it basically put a big check mark on the screen to show that it was a match, or if it wasn't a match, then it would put an X. If it was awaiting receiving, you got a different icon. So it was, yeah, so we did show that, and it works really well. Yes?
With the email approval, how do you authenticate?
With the email approval, we use the email address tied to their user ID. So so you have to have, you know, it basically, you have to have a Datahaven user in order to do the email approval. So when you get the email and you reply to it, then it says, okay, what inbound email address is this coming from? And then it resolves it to the exact user that it goes with. And then you can also do delegate approvals as well. So you can have other people that can approve on your behalf. You can do departmental approvals. And you can basically say, like, this group of people can approve from this workflow queue. So there's an infinite number of ways to set it up, but we do validate that the person that's replying to the email is a valid user in Datahaven.
But if I create an email where I'm not the actual person, I can kind of bypass authentication, right? Because if you're reading an actual email message.
You can't, because there's information. So and I'm repeating your questions for the recording. All your questions are around how users get authenticated for the email approval process. So there's tokens that are in the email that get sent to the person that can do the approval. There's tokens in there that are basically, that's how we basically match it back up with the invoice. So there's a token in there, so you have to have received the email in order to approve it. So you can't just craft your own email and reply to that email and say approve, and it approves some document. It's a really long GUID that has special characters in it and everything else. So it's basically, we match it back up with the transaction in that way. So when it gets routed in workflow, it gets this value. And if you route it out of the queue, if somebody gets to it first and approves it, and then I reply to the email, then it's not going to approve it again. It's going to send back a message to the approver to say, hey, this was already approved by somebody. It's no longer in that approval step. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, so just a couple minutes more, then we'll have the drawing. Just to let everybody know, this is available if you want to host this in a private cloud. Public cloud option will be available by the end of this year. Anybody want to know pricing? No? Okay, we'll skip that slide. Just kidding. So the pricing breaks down like this on a per user per month basis. This does not include the OCR piece, but it does include everything else. If you're going to have a user with both the customer engagement and the finance and operations license, there is a 40% multi-platform discount built in, so you get both. You get the second license almost for free. And we do have other discounts available for volume and long-term subscription commitments. And then finally, if you host it yourself, this is what your pricing looks like. And if we host it, then you would add $2 per user per month for the hosting charge. Make sure everybody's okay. No, it stopped advancing. Well, that is all we have. If you have any other questions, we are at booth 419 in the expo hall. We'll be there tonight. I think it's 5:30 to 7:30. And we'll be happy to dive into any other questions you have, scenarios you might want to walk through. But otherwise, we will go ahead and have the drawing. Did everybody get the card in that wanted to get it in? I did. Yeah. Your prize is working at our company every day. Can you just grab a card out of there for me, please? Kroger, Vanessa, Molina. Hey, $250. Okay, thank you, everybody.